Pawns are interesting because they are only allowed to move forward, and they can only move one space. They also capture by moving forward. So for example, if I take this pawn and I move this pawn one spot, the enemy is discouraged from stepping forward, because if he does, that means I can take him. So that's one thing that's very interesting about these, is how quickly the pawns become in danger of each other. So you want to step forward right away to keep the enemy from stepping forward. At the same time, when the pawn crosses the river, it gains the ability to also move left and right. So again, it's by one space. So once I cross the river, I can move left one, or I can move up one. I'm sorry, I can move forward one, or I can move to the right one. And again, you can capture with each of these movements. So getting one of these guys across the river is pretty important. But you can't just run up and get across the river. Odds are you have to get one of your other pieces to come around from behind and kill these pawns before they cross the river. So I think that's kind of interesting compared to European chess or Western chess, where you just have your pawns just like stand there head to head and not move for a long time. At the same time, Western chess, you can take 2 steps at the beginning, and you cannot do that in this game. So finally, we have the cannon, and I think the cannon really makes this game very interesting. The cannon moves like a rook, so it moves in a plus sign, any number of spaces, but it does not capture that way. It only captures in a plus sign, but you have to jump over a piece. So right now, this cannon, say, could take this knight by jumping over that cannon. You can also, say, move one of my pieces, if I had one piece, that I could put in between. I can jump over my piece and kill that cannon. So it doesn't matter if you're jumping over one of your own pieces or the enemy's pieces, but you have to jump a piece to capture with a cannon. What's neat is if you take 2 cannons and get them kind of close together, they can kind of become deadly and just keep leapfrogging over each other and take a lot of pieces. Another interesting thing to note, actually, I'll do it here. Right here, these in this castle, all 3 of these pieces, the only position they could move to in the opening of the game is the center of the castle. So keep that in mind. A lot of people, I see them move their guard here right away, and then move them again, or move them over here, just to free up the king to have more than one position to move to. But yeah, just keep that in mind. There's a little bit of a bottleneck right here. So okay, so that's kind of what the pieces do, and I feel like by having these visual symbols, it makes it a lot easier to explain. But in the end, you're probably going to want to get a little bit familiar with some of these Chinese characters. I do have a nice little cheat sheet, which I found. And what's interesting is, and you probably just want to come back here and pause the video if you want to see the cheat sheet, or just go to this site and tell them how wonderful they are for posting this. What's interesting is these are traditional Chinese characters. These over here are simplified Chinese characters. So just keep in mind that the set you play with may or may not have exactly the same writing that I'm showing you here. But like a good way to spot the difference is on a, actually I'm going to switch to the front image. I think this one's a little higher detail. This horse here, it's easy to spot because it has these 4 dashes under it, which are kind of likened to hooves, so it kind of like represents legs. So you have 4 legs and a tail, and you've got this mane coming off of the neck there. So it kind of represents a horse, like it looks like what it means. If you look at the simplified Chinese, they've simplified those legs to be one line, and they've left out the horse's mane to just simplify it to a square. So I find that that's usually the fastest way to tell whether or not you're dealing with simplified or traditional. It's just look at the horse. So okay, so why do I like this game more than like Western chess? Basically, in Western chess, our pieces are on opposite sides of the playing field, and there's a huge space in between us. And you have to move a few times before you're even in proximity of each other, before you're a threat to each other. And And then once you do, you start to create, which I like to call like a balancing act, where you'll be put in a position where someone might take your piece, but you'll back that piece up with another one, so that if they do try to take your piece, you're going to take theirs right away. And you create these chain reactions that are just ready to go off, and the game becomes a balancing act. And the first person to kind of like tip the balance, the whole chain reaction goes off, and the game progresses. And I think that chain reaction is very cool. In Chinese chess, when the starting position for all these pieces, basically we already have that balancing act going on. If you look at this cannon would have to jump, and it can take this horse. So before the game starts, either player's cannon could take either player's horse, but the horse is being protected by this cart. So I think it's neat that the balancing act has already begun. So for example, if your first move was to move your cart forward one, you'd be leaving your horse open, and then the person with the cannon will probably take your horse. So yeah, I find that alone very cool. There are fewer pieces, they are closer together. Like there's really like one move forward, and these guys are already a threat to each other. The game is much faster, and I really enjoy that whole dynamic. A couple things to note. Red moves first. I usually see red and black pieces like this here, and red moves first. You win by checkmating or stalemating. Actually, so getting a stalemate on your opponent is a win. They actually have a rule against kind of like perpetual movements. So if I were to move one and put your king in check, and you move your king, and I move one over and put your king back in check, and you move your king back to where it started, you can create this little perpetual cycle, and it's actually kind of forbidden. Like the person creating the cycle can lose, and that's usually the person causing the check. It's also the same for just chasing pieces around the board. The person causing the problem can lose. So keep that in mind when you play. But other than that, I say just give it a shot. Look around online. There's plenty of places you can play online, or like download an app and play. Like I said, you could play with symbols most of the time, so it shouldn't be too overwhelming. But it's a lot of fun, and I'm glad somebody taught me. So hopefully you'll be glad that I took the time to teach you. Thanks.